All right, let's go. Imagine the world before us. No cities, no farms, no roads, no people at all. Just endless forests, cold open plains, and warm shallow seas that stretched unbroken to the horizon. And living in that world were animals so large, so strange, and so dangerous that if you saw one today, your brain would simply refuse to believe it was real. These were not movie monsters. They were flesh and blood. They breathed, they hunted, they bred, and they ruled their corner of the world for millions of years before vanishing into the rock and the dust. Some of them were so big, they reshaped the land they walked on. Some of them were so fast and so silent that their prey never knew they were there. In this video, we are counting down 10 of the most terrifying creatures that ever lived, starting at number 10 and working our way down to the single most fearsome predator the planet has ever produced. Some of these animals lived long before anything like us existed, but a surprising number of them shared the land with our distant ancestors. They walked the same valleys, drank from the same rivers, and a few of them almost certainly hunted the early humans who crossed their path. For most of the story of life on Earth, we were not the rulers of anything. We were small, slow, soft creatures trying to survive in a world built for giants. So take a breath, and let's step back into a time when humans were not the top of the food chain. Not even close. Number 10. The bug, the size of a crocodile. Picture a forest 300 million years ago, long before the first dinosaur ever took a step. The air is thick and wet and warm, and the trees rise like green towers into a steaming sky. The ground is a tangle of ferns and moss and rotting logs. Now, picture something moving across that forest floor. It is long. It is segmented. Its body ripples as it comes, and it is coming straight toward you. This is Arthropleura, and it was the largest land invertebrate that has ever existed. Think of a millipede, the harmless little creature that curls up under a rock in your garden. Now stretch it out to the length of a small car. Arthropleura could grow more than 8 feet long and weigh as much as a grown man. It had dozens of pairs of legs rippling in waves along its armored body, and a hard shell made of overlapping plates that no predator of its time could crack. Now you might be wondering how any insect relative could possibly grow that big. The answer is hidden in the air itself. Back then, the atmosphere held far more oxygen than it does today. Nearly a third more than the air you are breathing right now. Creatures like Arthropleura breathe through tiny holes in their shells, and the richer the air, the larger they can grow. So in that oxygen-rich world, the bugs became giants. This monster rippled through the swamps, feeding on plants, ferns, and rotting wood, with almost nothing on the planet big enough to threaten it. Scientists have even found its fossilized trackways, long parallel rows of footprints pressed into ancient mud, each trail wider than a bicycle and stretching for many feet. When those tracks were first discovered, before anyone knew what made them, they were a complete mystery. What kind of animal could leave a path like that? The good news, if you can call it that, is that Arthropleura was probably a gentle giant, a plant eater that meant you no harm at all. The bad news is that it would not have known, and would not have cared, if it walked right over you in the dark. And remember, this is only the beginning of our list, because the further down we go, the larger these creatures grow, and the hungrier they get. Number 9. A snake longer than a school bus. Deep in the warm, flooded swamps of South America, around 60 million years ago, the age of the dinosaurs was already over. The great reptiles were gone, but the warm, wet world they left behind did not stay empty for long. Something had moved in to take their place at the very top of the food chain. It moved without legs. It moved without a single sound. And it was the largest snake the world has ever known. Its name is Titanoboa, and the numbers behind it are almost impossible to take in. This snake grew up to 42 feet long. Stop and picture that. That is longer than a school bus parked at the curb. At its thickest point, the body of Titanoboa was as wide as a human waist, so thick that a grown man could not have wrapped his arms around it. It weighed more than a ton, as much as a small car. A snake that size does not need to chase anything. It does not race across the ground after its meals. Titanoboa was a patient ambush hunter that lurked in the rivers and swamps, its enormous body hidden just beneath the muddy surface, perfectly still, waiting. When a crocodile or a giant turtle came to the water's edge, the snake would explode forward, throw its coils around the animal, and squeeze with a force strong enough to stop a heart and crush bone. Then slowly, it would swallow the body whole. Think about what that really means. Titanoboa was so large that it ate crocodiles for dinner. The crocodile, the very animal we think of as the king of the river, was just another meal. It lived in a world that was hotter than ours, and many scientists believe that heat is the key to its size. A snake is a cold-blooded animal, and the warmer its world, the larger its body can grow. In those steaming, sweltering jungles, the temperature was perfect for building a giant. Its bones were first discovered in a coal mine in Colombia, and when scientists laid out a single vertebra, just one piece of the spine, it was so large they at first struggled to believe it came from a snake at all. So in that ancient, dripping jungle, Titanoboa ruled the water. A silent giant that feared absolutely nothing. If you had been there, you would never have heard it coming. By the time you felt the first cold coil tighten around your legs, it would already have been far too late. Number 8. The eagle that hunted giants. Now we leave the swamps behind and we look up to the cool, misty skies above the islands of New Zealand. For most of their history, those islands had no large predators on the ground at all. No big cats, no wolves, no bears. It was a paradise for birds. But paradise had a price, because while the ground was safe, death waited in the air. They had Haast's eagle, and it was the largest eagle that has ever flown. This was not a bird you would have admired from a safe distance. With a wingspan of nearly 10 feet and talons as long and as sharp as the claws of a tiger, Haast's eagle was a flying weapon. It weighed up to 30 pounds, far heavier than any eagle alive today, with a body built not for soaring lazily on the wind, but for raw, brutal power in a dive. And its prey was not rabbits or fish or small birds. Its prey was the moa, a giant flightless bird that could stand 12 feet tall and weigh more than 500 pounds. Let that sink in. This was an eagle that hunted a creature the size of a horse. It would perch high on a ridge, scanning the valleys below, and when it spotted a moa, it would launch into a dive at speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. It slammed into the moa's body with the force of a falling concrete block, driving its enormous talons deep into the flesh, gripping the spine and the organs, killing an animal many times its own weight. Now, here is the part of the story that turns from amazing to chilling. When the first people arrived in New Zealand only a few hundred years ago, this eagle was still alive, and it was big enough, and strong enough, and bold enough, that it would not necessarily have seen a human as something to fear. To an eagle that brought down 500-pound birds, a small person, or a child, was simply another animal moving through the open. Old legends from the region tell of a giant bird that swooped down from the mountains and carried people away. For a long time, scholars dismissed those stories as pure myth, the kind of tale every culture invents. Then the bones of Haast's eagle were dug from the earth, and the size of those talons was measured, and suddenly the legends did not sound impossible at all. They sounded like memory. The eagle vanished soon after the moa it depended on were hunted away, its entire world collapsing along with its prey. But for a while, in those green and silent islands, the most dangerous thing in the sky was watching the ground below, and it was hungry. Number 7. The ape that towered over us. Deep in the bamboo forests of ancient Asia, hundreds of thousands of years ago, something enormous was moving through the shadows. It was covered in dark, shaggy hair. It could rise up on 2 legs or move on all 4s. And when it stood at its full height, it was nearly 10 feet tall. This was Gigantopithecus, the largest ape that has ever lived. To really picture it, start with a gorilla, the biggest ape alive today. Now imagine that gorilla grown to the size of a polar bear standing on its hind legs, looming over a fully grown man, its shoulders broad enough to blot out the sun behind it. Gigantopithecus may have weighed up to half a ton, which is roughly 3 times the weight of the largest gorilla on Earth right now. Its jaws were massive and powerful, built for grinding through tough bamboo, roots, and fibrous plants for hours at a time. For a long time, almost everything we knew about this colossal creature came from the strangest source. Its huge teeth had been collected for centuries and sold in traditional medicine shops across Asia, labeled as so-called dragon bones, ground up into powders. A curious scientist found some of these teeth in a shop, recognized that they came from an ape, and realized he was holding the remains of a giant the world had completely forgotten. From a few teeth and a handful of jawbones, researchers slowly built a picture of a creature that defied belief. And here is the detail that should give you chills. Gigantopithecus did not live in some impossibly distant age before mammals existed. It shared this planet with early humans. Our ancestors walked the same forests, drank from the same streams, and almost certainly looked up one day to see this towering hairy shadow moving silently through the trees. We do not know for certain whether it was a peaceful plant eater or something more aggressive. But we do know that for a small, weak, hairless human armed with nothing but a sharpened stick, an ape standing 10 feet tall would have been one of the most terrifying things imaginable. Some people even believe that stories of giant ape men hiding in remote forests are distant echoes, faint cultural memories, of a time when this creature truly walked the earth. Whether that is true or simply a coincidence, one fact is certain. For a long stretch of our history, we were not the largest apes in the forest. Something much bigger was sharing it with us. Number 6. The cat with knives for teeth. Now we come to a predator that nearly every one of our Ice Age ancestors would have known and feared by sight. A hunter built for a single purpose: to bring down animals far larger than itself. This is Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, and it was one of the deadliest land killers of the entire Ice Age. Forget the gentle house cat curled up on a windowsill. Forget even the lion stalking the savannah. Smilodon was shorter but far heavier and more muscular than any big cat alive today, with a thick, powerful chest and forelimbs packed with raw, crushing strength. It was built like a wrestler, not a runner. But its most famous weapons, the ones that gave it its name, were its teeth. 2 enormous curved fangs, each one nearly a foot long, grew down from its upper jaw like a pair of bone daggers. These were not for show, and they were not for fighting other cats. Smilodon used them to deliver one single, deep, fatal bite to the soft throat or belly of its prey. First, it would use its incredibly strong arms to wrestle a huge animal to the ground and pin it in place, and only then, with the prey held still, would it drive those great fangs home. It hunted bison, camels, young mammoths, and the enormous giant ground sloths that lumbered across the ancient plains. This was not a predator that ran its victims down over long distances in the open. It was an ambush hunter that hid in cover, waited with absolute patience, and then attacked in a single explosive burst of muscle and teeth. And here is what makes Smilodon so deeply unsettling for us in particular. It lived right alongside early humans. Our ancestors hunted the very same herds, walked the very same valleys, and now and then they stopped being the hunters and became the hunted. Picture a small band of people crossing an open plain in the fading light of dusk, tired, watchful, exposed. Then, picture a shape rising slowly from the tall grass, low and silent, with two great curved fangs catching the very last of the evening light. For thousands upon thousands of years, that was not a nightmare. It was a real and constant danger that real people carried with them every single day of their lives. The saber-toothed cat finally died out at the close of the Ice Age, as the great herds it relied on dwindled and disappeared. But while it lived, few creatures that ever walked the land were more frightening to meet. Number 5. The crocodile that ate dinosaurs. We tend to think of crocodiles as the ancient survivors, the living fossils that have barely changed in 100 million years, lurking patiently at the water's edge. But there was a time when a crocodile grew so monstrously large that it did not wait for fish or waiting animals. It hunted dinosaurs. Meet Sarcosuchus, a name that means flesh crocodile, though almost everyone simply calls it the super croc. Around 100 million years ago, in the wide, slow rivers of ancient Africa, this giant ruled the water with total authority. Sarcosuchus grew up to 40 feet long, nearly twice the length of the largest saltwater crocodiles alive today, the ones we already consider monsters. It weighed as much as 8 tons, roughly the weight of a fully loaded delivery truck. Its skull alone was longer than a tall man, and those jaws were lined with more than 100 thick, cone-shaped teeth, built not for slicing but for gripping and crushing, and never, ever letting go. At the very tip of its long snout was a strange bony bulge, a hollow swelling that scientists are still trying to fully understand. It may have given the animal an incredible sense of smell, or helped it detect the smallest vibrations moving through the water, or amplified a deep booming call across the river. Now, picture the scene. The super croc lies almost completely still in a wide, muddy river, only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface, as motionless as a floating log. On the bank, a dinosaur lowers its long neck to drink, unaware. In a single, explosive lunge, 8 tons of armored predator erupts from the water, clamps down with a bite powerful enough to shatter bone, and drags its thrashing victim under the surface to drown. This was an animal that did not fear the giant reptiles of its age. It did not need to compete with them on land. It simply waited, with endless patience, for them to come to the water, and then it took them. Crocodiles never again grew to anything like that size. But for tens of millions of years, the single most dangerous place in the entire ancient world was not the deep forest, and it was not the open plain. It was the quiet, deceptive edge of the water. Number 4. The flying reptile, the size of a plane. Look up again. But this time go back much further still, deep into the age of the dinosaurs. Something is moving across the sky, and it is so large that for a moment you might genuinely mistake it for a small aircraft drifting overhead. This is Quetzalcoatlus, and it was the largest flying animal that has ever existed in the history of the planet. Its wingspan reached up to 36 feet, as wide as a small fighter jet, a span of leathery wings stretched between impossibly long finger bones. And yet the truly astonishing thing is its size on the ground. When Quetzalcoatlus folded its wings and stood on all fours, it was as tall as a giraffe. It could have looked a grown human being straight in the eye without even lowering its head. For a creature that enormous, simply standing up is impressive. The fact that it could fly at all seems to break the rules of nature. So how did something the height of a giraffe get into the air? Scientists believe it did not run and flap like a bird. Instead, it crouched, then vaulted upward off its powerful front limbs in a single great leap, snapping open its vast wings and catching the wind to climb. Once aloft, it could glide for hundreds of miles with barely a beat, riding the warm air like a living glider. For many years, people imagined it skimming gracefully over the sea, dipping down to snatch fish from the waves. But more recent research points to something far more unsettling. Quetzalcoatlus may have been a hunter on the ground, striding across the open landscape on those long legs and stabbing down at smaller dinosaurs and other prey with its enormous spear-like beak, like a grotesque stork the size of a giraffe. Now imagine standing on an open plain and seeing that vast shadow sweep across the ground toward you. Imagine the creature wheeling in the sky, folding its wings, landing with a thump, and walking in your direction on legs as long as a horse, its head alone longer than your entire body. It is one of the strangest and most magnificent animals nature has ever assembled. A giant that shattered every assumption about how large a flying creature could possibly be. And it ruled the skies right up until the very last days of the age of the dinosaurs. Number 3. The dinosaur bigger than the king. Almost everyone on Earth knows the Tyrannosaurus, the famous so-called king of the dinosaurs, with its massive head and bone-crushing jaws. But there was a meat-eater that grew even larger than the king, a predator so strange and so unexpected that scientists argued bitterly about it for decades. This is Spinosaurus, and it may well be the most unusual giant carnivore that has ever lived. Spinosaurus was longer than Tyrannosaurus, stretching up to 50 feet from the tip of its narrow snout to the end of its tail, and rising from its back was its most famous feature, a huge sail of skin stretched over tall spines of bone, standing higher than a grown person. Nobody is entirely sure what that great sail was for. It may have been used to display to rivals and mates a billboard of bone, or to help the animal control its body temperature in the hot African climate. But the real surprises came when scientists looked closely at the rest of its body, and what they found rewrote everything. Spinosaurus had a long, narrow snout filled with cone-shaped teeth, almost exactly like a crocodile. It had dense, heavy bones, like a hippopotamus, the kind of bones that help an animal sink rather than float. Its nostrils sat high up on its skull, and its tail was broad and flat, shaped like a paddle. Piece by piece, the conclusion became impossible to avoid, and it was astonishing. Spinosaurus was a swimmer. This was a giant predatory dinosaur that hunted in the water, chasing down fish the size of cars in the great rivers of ancient Africa. Picture a creature longer than a city bus, with an enormous sail rising from its spine, slipping silently through a wide river, with only its eyes and the top of its sail breaking the surface. Nothing else quite like it has ever been discovered, before or since. It was a top predator that walked the land and ruled the water, a true monster of two worlds at once. For a long time, we did not even have a complete skeleton to study, because the first and finest fossils ever found were stored in a museum that was destroyed during a war, lost forever in a single night. We are still, even now, piecing together the full story of this incredible animal from scattered bones. But one thing is already beyond doubt. The king of the dinosaurs was not the biggest hunter of his world after all. Number 2. The whale that hunted other whales. We are nearing the very end of our countdown now, and so we return one last time to the sea, because the ocean has always concealed the largest and most terrible monsters of all. Today, the sperm whale is a gentle giant, the largest toothed animal alive, diving thousands of feet into the cold dark to hunt squid. It is huge, but it is harmless to almost everything larger than its prey. Now travel back millions of years to a warmer ocean and meet a whale of very nearly the same size that lived in a completely different way. It did not hunt squid. It hunted other whales. This is Leviathan, named directly after the legendary sea monster of ancient story, the Leviathan, and the name is well earned. It measured around 50 feet long, as large as a modern sperm whale. But here's the crucial difference. The sperm whale has small teeth, and only in its lower jaw. Leviathan had enormous teeth, set in both its upper and lower jaws, and they were the largest biting teeth of any animal ever discovered, anywhere, in all of history. Each tooth was over a foot long, and as thick as a strong man's arm. Try to truly picture that. A mouth the size of a small room, lined top and bottom, with dozens of teeth, as long as your forearm, and as thick as fence posts, snapping shut with unimaginable force. This was a hunter that could seize a smaller whale in its jaws, crush its ribs in an instant, and tear it apart in the open water. And it did not rule the ancient seas alone. It shared those warm oceans with the colossal shark we are about to meet at number 1, and the two of them together must have been the absolute undisputed rulers of their underwater world. Two titans circling the same blue depths. Now imagine the open ocean millions of years ago. How? A pod of medium-sized whales swims peacefully through the sunlit water, calves close beside their mothers. And below them, rising fast and silent from the darkness, comes a mouth full of foot-long teeth. There was nowhere to flee to, and nothing they could do. For nearly every other creature in that sea, Leviathan mare. And yet, as enormous and terrifying as this whale was, it was still not the single most feared hunter in those ancient waters. That final, dreadful title belongs to one last animal. Number 1. The largest shark that ever lived. Here it is, the creature at the very top of our list, the most fearsome predator the planet has ever produced. It ruled every ocean on Earth for millions of years, and even now, countless ages after its extinction, the mere thought of it is enough to send a cold shiver down the spine. This is Megalodon, the giant shark, and there was nothing at all, that was small about it. Consider the great white shark, the most feared predator in our oceans today, the animal that has terrified beachgoers for generations. A large great white can reach around 20 feet in length. Megalodon grew to 60 feet, 3 full times that length, as long as a railway carriage. It weighed as much as 50 tons. Its mouth opened so impossibly wide that a grown adult could have stood upright inside it with room to spare. And those jaws were lined with row upon row of serrated teeth, each one the size of a human hand, each one a perfect razor-edged cutting blade. In fact, the teeth are how we know it existed at all. A shark skeleton is made of cartilage, which rots away and almost never fossilizes. So for the most part, Megalodon left behind only its enormous teeth, scattered across the ancient seabeds of the world. When people first found them, long ago, they had no idea what they were, and believed they were the petrified tongues of dragons or serpents. Scientists estimate that the bite of Megalodon was the most powerful of any animal that has ever lived, strong enough to crush the hull of a small boat. So what does a predator like that hunt? The answer is simple and staggering. It hunted whales. Megalodon cruised the warm oceans of the entire planet, seeking out the largest animals it could find. It is thought to have attacked from below, ramming its prey at speed, and tearing off the fins and tail first to stop the whale from escaping, before circling back to finish the kill. We are not guessing about this. Fossil whale bones have been pulled from the rock with the deep, unmistakable gouges of Megalodon teeth still carved into them, frozen evidence of a hunt that happened millions of years ago. For around 20 million years, this single species of shark was the undisputed ruler of every sea on Earth. Then slowly, the world began to change. The oceans cooled, currents shifted, and the great whales it depended on moved into colder waters, where the giant could not follow. Bit by bit, the largest shark that ever lived faded from the seas, until it was gone. And here, at the end of our journey, is the thought that truly stays with you. There is no animal alive today that comes anywhere close. We share our modern world with lions and bears and crocodiles and great white sharks, and we rightly call them dangerous. But every single one of them is small beside the giants that came before. For almost the entire history of life on this planet, the world did not belong to us. It belonged to monsters. We are simply the ones who arrived after they were gone, the small and the soft and the lucky, inheriting a world the giants left behind. So the next time the ocean looks calm and endless, or the forest goes suddenly quiet around you, remember what once moved through places exactly like these. And perhaps be a little grateful for the strange and fortunate timing that let us, the smallest and weakest of all these creatures, inherit the earth at last. If you enjoyed this journey into the deep and dangerous past, subscribe for more. And tell us down in the comments which of these 10 creatures you would least want to meet face to face. Until next time.